let's talk about my birthday twin. I'm not saying I was Marilyn Monroe in a past existence. I'm just saying she died at the age of 36 in 1962, and 36 years and 10 months later, I was born on her birthday. That's all I'm saying. Cause I ain't leaving alone. Feel like I could be honest, babe. We both know that we're grown. That's why I wanna know how many drinks would it take you to leave with me? Yeah, you look good and I got money, but I don't wanna waste my time. Hi, welcome to my bubble where we do a little bit of adulting, a little bit of healing, and a little bit of creating. Hi, so today we are doing another conspiracy theory, but this time, sorry, my head's itchy, but I'm also like being kind of particular about my hair. There's really like a lot going on. Today we are discussing the conspiracy theory around Marilyn Monroe's death. Everybody knows, or at least has heard the name Marilyn Monroe, so let's get into it. Okay, let's talk about my birthday twin. My connection to Marilyn isn't because, she's Marilyn Monroe, and, I know the black community has a thing of like,
stop idolizing these white characters and idolize the black characters.
And like, yes, I agree, for sure. But that's not my connection to Marilyn. That's my birthday twin, so I fuck with her, period. But also, I think Marilyn is a really good, whatever. I think Marilyn is a good example of the other kind of Geminis because, everyone knows the stigma attached to Geminis and everyone has their reasons for not liking Geminis, whatever. But Marilyn Monroe is a really good example of, like, the emotional Geminis, A lot of the people in the documentary that we're going to discuss, these are people that knew her, that were with her regularly, right? A lot of people described her as like timid, shy, lovable, She was described as fragile, vulnerable, and quote, something about her that felt like it could be easily destroyed. Like, not all Geminis come in wreaking havoc, There are a lot of us that are just super emotional and just like... But if you take us there, then the Gemini starts to show, Just saying. Don't get it wrong. Don't get it twisted. It's in there. It's just not always on go all the time. Wow. I feel like, whatever. Focus. Right? Some people even say she was naive. She's gentle. And there's like a soft quality about her. That's my birthday twin. I feel you, twin. Now, in high school, my senior year of high school, I had I believe it was like a government class or whatever. And in that, we investigated JFK's assassination, which we're not going to get into that. But like, basically in the class, like, we watched the documentary. We're given all of like the details and blah, blah, blah. And it was, you decide, you think the person that went down for it actually did it, or you think the government orchestrated it. I think the government orchestrated it, but that's another conversation for another day. So since she's my birthday twin, I basically watch any and everything Marilyn Monroe related. So years and years ago, not years and years, let me not be dramatic, but years ago, I had watched the Lifetime, like, movie TV series, whatever, on Marilyn. It was called The Secret Life of Marilyn Monroe. It came out in 2015, but when I saw it, it was up on Netflix. So I watched it. I really like that. I think that's really good, and I think that gives I don't want to say accurate because I don't know her, but it gives a really good in-depth detail about her life, not just like her fame. Like it travels her whole life, I think that's really good. You should watch that if you haven't seen it. When I had seen that, it made me think back to government class and JFK's assassination and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, damn. I mean, even that, watching The Secret Life of Marilyn Monroe, that's what made me decide, like, I don't remember how, because I don't really remember the TV series. But watching that is what made me decide that Marilyn was murdered because of JFK. That was my stance. I figured she had like seen or like saw something that she wasn't supposed to see, and while she was, you know, sneaking around with the president, and I was like, yeah, no, they offed her because she was part of some shit that she shouldn't have been part of. Now, the most recent documentary that I watched about her, currently up on Netflix, called The Mystery of Marilyn Monroe, The Unheard Tapes. Now, Unheard Tapes is what made me watch it, because it made me think of, like, the Ted Bundy tapes, and I was like, ooh, tapes, but, you know, not murderous, it's Marilyn Monroe, but that's not all the way what it was, but it kind of, you know, I expected it to be similar. So, that's what we're going to get into. We're going to discuss based on the Unheard Tapes. It's currently up on Netflix. I have not seen Blonde yet. I do plan on it. I don't know when, but, like, I'll watch it eventually. So the documentary opens with the fact that in the 1980s, the LA District Attorney reopened the case about her murder. Well, about her death, excuse me. Right? I believe they said they felt like, or somebody felt like the CIA killed her. Right? But we'll get into all of that. Blah, blah, blah. Right? The documentary makes a point to say that, like, she worked the system to her advantage, and, you know, in the 40s, the industry revolved around sex. Now it revolves around money and, like, you know, your connections and things. But in the 40s, it was about sex. Okay, that's just what it was. We know the industry is evil. That's what it was. Now, from Marilyn's mid-20s forward, she only dated famous men. Okay. Her first, well, I don't want to say her first, but, like, well, the way it's presented, her first, like, public famous man she had a terminally ill sugar daddy at 23, period, as she should. She was talking with the family of her last known psychiatrist, and she would be talking about, like, dating someone named the General, and he's so, you know, he's so wonderful, he's so this, he's so that, but she couldn't mention, like, who he is because he's so important, you know? You know, the General's also what they called, or the nickname for Attorney General Robert Kennedy. So not JFK, but his brother. But, you know, she referenced as the General. She dated Joe DiMaggio. When they started dating, he was already a retired baseball player. She dated Arthur Miller, the nation's most famous playwright. At the time that they were dating, she was 29, he was 40. Like, it was a lot of, you know, if you know, you know. That's whatever. Right? Now, she dated Bobby Kennedy, or she was involved with Bobby Kennedy well into JFK's presidency. You know, they kind of, like, bounced back and forth. They bounced her back and forth. That I can't speak English, apparently, which I think is weird, but, like, not for her, but in terms of them, like, okay, though, whatever, white men, do whatever you want to do. But I mean, also their father verbatim told them, like, get laid as much as you can. Right? This is the same father who had a lot of power in Hollywood, and he literally would be fucking women he would literally be sleeping with women in his office, and, like, everybody would know about it, and they would have to, like, wait outside because the father is busy in the office. Like, but again, it's the 40s, whatever. So the documentary, there's a couple different people, there's many people involved, but in the context of the conspiracy, we're going to talk about the family of her last known psychiatrist, the family being the son of the psychiatrist, and the son, wife, and daughter of the psychiatrist. We're going to talk about Fred Otash, who was a ex-cop turned private investigator who worked for literally any and everybody. Oh, excuse me. And then I'm going to tell y'all a few quotes of what Marilyn herself said, you know, and then we'll get into the details and her death and blah, blah, blah. And we're going to talk about her housekeeper, because she plays a part, not plays a part in her death, but she plays a part in the story. So yes, when we're introduced to the family of the last known psychiatrist, right, the son who is also a psychiatrist now, says, he was, since the father was a psychiatrist for people in the business, so the son would be there and be not involved, but this is their house, he would be around. So the son made a point to say, like, the business is full of phony and narcissistic characters, and he didn't like them, nor did he like her, nor did he like Marilyn in the beginning, but he grew to like her eventually. The son said his father had never had a patient commit suicide. Marilyn would be hanging out with the family and having cocktails before dinner. That's where they would interact a lot, and they get to know each other and get to know. That's where they became close, because Marilyn would be at their house all the time, and it would just be that kind of time, right? Based on her psychiatrist's like papers and documents or whatever, he said that she had paranoid tendencies, but she was not schizophrenic. She was more masochistic, right? She had a tendency to act out her, orphan girl rejections. Quote, I don't know, that's not me putting, that's quote unquote, that's what he said, not me. Right? He said she's a waif. She needed a family. She desired the family connection and like that bond and closeness with people. So the psychiatrist was like, all right, we're gonna not adopt you into our family, but like you can hang out with us. And it's like, he knew that, well, one, she was too famous to go into the office because, she's Marilyn Monroe and like she'll get swarmed and blah, 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 blah. So Marilyn would go to their house and then they would all hang out. She would be there for dinner. They would be having drinks, blah, 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 blah. The son said that the son and Marilyn ended up bonding over their left-wing perspective. Because remember, originally the son didn't like her, but then they were, I assume at dinner one time or like during the conversations, they started having a debate or like a conversation about something, and the son was very left wing and stood in his stance, and Marilyn, to his shock, agreed with him, and it was like, okay, I could like her. So they started bonding over that. The son made it a point to say that she got depressed over how horrible she felt about herself. Like she would say things like, nothing comes out right, nothing ever goes my way, everything I do turns to shit, those kinds of things. Very like self-hatred, Marilyn made it a point to say that her happiest period in life was occurred when she was a period of time that she was with Miller, because she was pregnant at that time, and above everything else she wanted a family. So I was like, oh my gosh, poor baby. But I mean, she also had very horrible relationships with all of these men, but if you want to get into that, watch the documentary. They don't necessarily play a part in the conspiracy of her death. They're more so just more details as to why her life wasn't the best, and probably not a lot of what aided in, but second tier what aided in her feeling horrible about herself. But I don't want to get into that. The wife and daughter, when they were having a conversation with the journalist and who was investigating and blah, 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 the daughter, they made it a point to say that there was an at-homeness with her body. Like she was very in tune with herself, which is not crazy, but it's very Gemini twins to be like so in tune with yourself and in tune with your body and like embrace yourself. Because they said Marilyn, all of her roles she didn't train for these roles, like in the way that actors now will, what is it called? Is it method acting? But in the way that actors and actresses now will spend months at a time being in their character full time, like Marilyn didn't have to do that. She just pulled from experiences in her life and like she just tapped into a different side of herself. Period. But then the other Gemini twin is on the inside like hating herself and just like, I can't get anything right and nothing goes my way and just I feel you. Not to that extent, but I feel her. Right? So the wife and daughter said like they will be having a lot of girl talk during the cocktails before dinner, and the daughter said she at one point she spoke of a new man in her life. Marilyn would say he's terrific, he's neat, and blah 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 blah. And Marilyn would say, like, but he's so important. Like, he's such an important person. Again, because Marilyn dated famous men. He's such an important person that I can't tell you who he is. But during their conversations, Marilyn would refer to him as the general. I don't know the exact time frame, like 2-3 years, whatever. But during the time of Marilyn being with or meeting with this psychiatrist, basically they brought her into their family structure just so that she could experience, you know, the that bond and that like closeness with people. But then eventually the father, Maryland's psychiatrist, let it be known that like she can quote unquote establish roots by herself. Like she can do things for herself. And that's what not caused her, but the eventually with that confidence, I guess, she ended up buying a house. Because, you know, now she's firmly placed. It's like, this is the first thing she ever owned by herself. It's like, period. Right? Okay. Let's keep going. Later in the documentary, literally more towards the end, we meet Fred Otash, or Otosh, I don't remember. Now, he's a private investigator, right? He literally out of his own mouth, out of his own mouth, he says, I will work for any and everybody. Anybody that's paying me, I'm going to work for it. Like, as a PI, not as a cop, but I'm sure he did it as a cop too. Right? He was like, I worked for and against the mafia. I worked for and against law enforcement. I worked for and against the White House. I worked for and against Hoffa. Now, that not took me, but like that made me like, because again, I forget what the theory is called, but there's this theory of like you looking into things right before you experience them. Crazy. This is, Jesus, I don't know. You probably didn't hear that, but the way my neck cracked just now, my goodness. But whatever, right? Which was interesting to me and like shook me for a second, because literally not too long before, like a couple weeks prior, I had literally, if you have never seen any of my other videos, I stay free regularly. Every so often, I go into these phases where I just randomly watch things. Like, I'll watch random movies that I've never heard of. I'll watch random documentaries I've never heard of. Right? Just to, you know, because why not? So, I watched this documentary on the mafia. It was called, what was it called? It's on Netflix. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's still up. It's on Netflix. It's called Fear City, New York versus the Mafia. That documentary is about how the New York attorneys and whoever took down all 5 mafia families all at the same time, because they established that they all had a connection running shit, and they took them all down, right? So that's how I learned / heard about Hoffa at all in general, right? So then now watching this documentary and hearing Fred Otash worked for Hoffa, who was an Italian mob boss who ran the trucker union. What? Right? So I was like, damn, okay. So then Fred Otash, let's just say Otash. Then Fred Otash provided the context that, you know, Bobby, the general, went after Hoffa. They were basically trying to like prove that he's involved in criminalist things and, you know, regular government shit. Right? So since he said Bobby went after Hoffa, Hoffa told Otash to gather a derogatory profile on both Kennedy brothers and Marilyn, and he told him to use bugs. So Otash put bugs in the Peter Lawfer's Malibu house that everyone regularly went to and partied at, and everyone was very open about being at that house and partying there. Right? Which, side note, if you watch the documentary, I think it's so interesting that at a point in time, a literal U.S. president could go into the ocean and like he could be at a house, go into the ocean and like be out and about on the beach and not, you know, get swarmed and attacked. Now, technically, he did have to go back inside because he started to draw a crowd, but like presidents could never do that nowadays. Never, ever, right? But I just thought that was interesting. Anyway, move on. So Otash put bugs in the Malibu house, like their party house, and in Marilyn's house, the house that she bought. Right? Okay. Otash says that the bugs caught all the talking at the Malibu house, caught all of JFK and Marilyn's, quote, love making while in Malibu. I caught all of that, right? Now, at Marilyn's house was bugged by one of Hoffa's workers. And the bugs at Marilyn's house heard the general at her house more than they heard JFK at her house, right? Cool. Right? Then we bring in Reed Wilson, who is quote, a renowned eavesdropper. But, you know, they give his official title as surveillance expert. But I was like, that's crazy. A renowned eavesdropper? That's crazy. Right? And apparently Wilson was never known to be a liar. Right? So as the journalist is investigating and talking and blah, 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 Wilson makes it a point to say, like, her murder is baloney. Like, saying that she was murdered is nonsense. So he asks, what did Fred Otosh say? So the journalist responds, like, Fred told me the recordings of the general, that there are recordings of the general, Bobby, calling Marilyn Monroe the night of the death. How she was saying that she felt used, and like they got into this real heated argument, and Wilson was basically like, yeah, that's true. She was raised in a stink. She felt like she was being used, and she felt like that she was just her plaything, and blah blah blah. But Wilson said after he said she felt like she was being used and blah 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 blah, he then said, I don't feel like she was heartbroken, which is like, what? Because if you just watch the rest of it, and that you'll see why that is like, what? Like, he makes a point to say that Marilyn literally called the White House to tell them, like, leave me alone. I'm not coming out there. If you want to come see me, then you come see me. Like, I'm not going out there. I hate all of you, blah, blah, blah. All of these kinds of things, right? So I'm like, okay, this is me putting all the pieces together. All at different points, and like progressively through the documentary, you know, they're playing the tapes of things Marilyn said. I don't really know where these tapes are from, because when I went into it, I was thinking just like the Ted Bundy tapes, like these are tapes from their conversation. But so I don't know where these actual tapes are from, or if these are just like recorded interviews over her life or what. But she was heard Marilyn was heard saying, I was never used to being happy, so it wasn't something I really counted on. Which is crazy because of like, oh, poor baby. So I guess somebody asked her what she wants to accomplish. She said, what I would like to accomplish, I would like to be a good actress, a true actress, an artist with integrity. And, you know, because again, think back, the industry was run on sex, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna do what I have to do to get these roles and get where I want to be, but like, don't get it confused. Like, I'm an artist and I can do this, right? Because she became the golden girl of Hollywood, right? So obviously she wouldn't become the golden girl of Hollywood if she couldn't actually act, right? And like, even with that, she took her craft very seriously. She moved to the East Coast and she studied at an art studio, and she developed her own production company, like an artist with integrity. I hear you, babe. I hear you. Right? Later in the documentary, as we're building up to, as we've been through a couple different, not derogatory, I mean, yes, derogatory, but as we've been through a couple relationships that were not necessarily the best, they insert the audio of her saying, having certain kinds of secrets for yourself. There is a need for aloneness, you know? And I'm like, what, bro? I don't know, whatever. I feel you, because me, sometimes I just need to be in my own bubble and in my space, and like, I don't want to talk to nobody. I don't want nobody to talk to me. Don't come see me. Sometimes I just don't want to interact with the outside world. So I feel you. But when I'm ready to be back outside, I'm ready to be back outside. But when I need to rejuvenate and be in my energy, I do that, and I don't care what nobody got to say about it. So it's like, I feel you. Now, for her, that may not necessarily have been the best, because, you know, after the miscarriage and with her deteriorating marriage to Miller, Yes, to Miller, she started taking pills and blah 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 blah. So, but everybody copes differently. Another time, there's an audio of her saying, "Happiness. Does one ever really know? Does one ever know that?" And I was like, one, that says a lot about her and how she felt and like her mentality. But I get what she was trying to say, because everyone has these like padded concepts of what happiness is, but then they get all those things and they're still not happy. That's like, it's still a thing that everybody says today. So I get what she was trying to say. Somebody had, I forget who it was, but somebody that she would regularly interact with, they said that she had been dealing with the Kennedy brothers since the 50s, right? They would be at Pete Lawford's house in Malibu. This is like their party house, both of the Kennedys would be present. They would be and open about their presence there. Pete Lawford was one of Frank Sinatra's, I think he said, a Rat Pack. Basically, he was one of the musicians with Frank Sinatra. Just to, everybody's in the industry. Marilyn also said, trying to be happy is just as hard as trying to be a good actress. You have to work at both of them. And I was like, that's fucking facts. So later into the investigation, the journalist points out that the FBI had been watching Marilyn since she was married to and dating Arthur Miller, because Arthur Miller was a suspected communist. And for context, this is the middle of the Cold War, and it's like nuclear war is a constant threat. So, they're watching her. That makes perfect sense right there. Like, it's not a foreign concept that the government is keeping track of suspected terrorists, right? Which is basically what it is. Suspected terrorists. Cool. Okay. Now, in March of 1962, Marilyn is in Mexico with known American communists and left-wingers that were kicked out of the U.S. But these are just, Marilyn, not to do my sis like this, but, she was very ditzy blonde. Like, you heard how people described her as being naive and gentle and fragile and those kinds of things, right? So these are just her friends. But she's in Mexico, she's hanging out with them. She doesn't necessarily care that they're black, whatever. She ain't got nothing to do with government, right? Other than the men she's involved with. March of 1962, she's in Mexico with them, having a conversation. Apparently, she told someone about a conversation that she had with Bobby, the general. Which, like, I get it. Like, first of all, don't slip up. Like, chill out. Don't just be, don't be sharing the pillow talk. Like, just keep it pushing. But, Marilyn didn't think that deep into it, I guess. That's my rationalization, maybe. It's like, she didn't think nothing of it because these are her friends. Like, she don't give a fuck how they feel about politics and da-da-da-da. Now, say they are communists and they are actually communicating with Castro's people and blah, blah, blah. Yes, it was probably not the best idea for her to go over there telling them stuff, but that's just how cookie crumbles sometimes. So the government stance on it was, she's volatile, she's the president's or these very high people in the government's plaything, and she's running around to a psychiatrist all the time. Like, she's the wrong person to be this intimate with both, not one, but both of the Kennedy brothers. The documentary also makes it a point to, like, puts emphasis on the fact that she was chosen, like, she was picked to sing Happy Birthday for JFK at his birthday event at Madison Square Garden. That's the dress that Kim Kardashian wore. The one dress that, Marilyn Monroe had on that nobody else has ever worn. That's the dress that she wore, where she sung at JFK's birthday. Which, like, whatever, though. Now, I mentioned that because I feel like they was like, all right, we're going to give you one last show of, like, enjoy this time because we about to get rid of you. That's how I took it. Because why would you pick her? her specifically, and everybody knows that she's involved with both brothers. Mind you, both of them are married and have a bunch of kids. Actually, at least Bobby has a bunch of kids. I don't know if JFK has kids or a bunch of kids with Jackie, but either way, everybody knows that they're involved. Why would you pick her to sing happy birthday? Right? So then, July of 62, an informant heard her say that she spoke with JFK in Malibu about the morality of atomic testing. And she was positive. They said, the informant said that her position was positively leftist, right? Okay. Shortly after that conversation, I don't think she went, but I believe they were saying like JFK went to watch a nuclear test, like not too long after they had that conversation. Now, at this same time, Castro is in Cuba asking the Soviet Union for military help. Right? So she can't just be spilling the beans about all of this happening. Like, nuclear war is a constant threat. Like, you can't be spilling secrets about what we're trying to do and blah, 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 right? So I got it, but like, whoa. Now, again, after the government being like, haha, she's the wrong person to be this intimate with these people. She's with her psychiatrist all the time. She's doing all these drugs and da da da. Like, she's loose-lipped. Like, she can't be talking about our nuclear plans. So, I don't know. Let's assume both Robert and the general made the decision like, okay, she's loose-lipped, cut all ties. The order is cut all ties with her. So the general calls her and is like, and basically calls it quits for both brothers. And she's extremely hurt by this because we're in the 60s now. She's been dealing with them since the 50s, early 50s, right? So she's been involved with them for quite some time. They've been sneaking around. She's been sneaking around with both brothers. They'd be at her house and all this, right? August of 62. Next month, the month after the informant heard her discuss that her and JFK were talking about nuclear testing or atomic testing. The month after, she dies. Right? So in August of 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead at the age of 36. Right? Let's get into the conspiracy. Which, real quick, I'm not saying I was Marilyn Monroe in a past existence. I'm just saying she died at the age of 36 in 1962. And 36 years and 10 months later, I was born on her birthday. That's all I'm saying. Right? But okay, let's get into the conspiracy, right? The accepted timeline of them discovering her death is 8 p.m. She goes in at night. She goes into her room, locks the door, and that was the last time they saw her. Now at 3 a.m., supposedly, her housekeeper sees that her light is still on and calls her psychiatrist. So then her psychiatrist drives the hour and a half determined to go see her, right? He peeks through a window and determines that she's dead, right? 4:25, the cops arrive. That's the accepted timeline. Cool? So the journalist looks into it. Now, the wife of one of the associates of her psychiatrist says that they were at an event. The associate and the wife were at some event, but the associate gets called away around 10 p.m. because something is wrong. Like, they're saying something is urgently wrong at Marilyn's house. Now, the associate's job was, says the wife, the associate's job is to keep press at bay. And the wife said, quote, "My husband fudged everything off. He kept everyone at abeyance." Right? Okay. So the associate says he was at Marilyn's house. He went to Marilyn's house at 11 p.m. Right there, discrepancy. Like, what, where are all these extra people in the official timeline? Right? Okay, cool. Now, keep going. The journalist finds an ambulance attendant who like was involved that night, right? Asked the attendant, and the ambulance attendant says when they got there, she was on her side, on the bed. They took her to Santa Monica emergency because they assumed that she was still alive, but she was comatose. And there are multiple other ambulatory and like medical people who corroborate this, right? So then the psychiatrist friend says, Marilyn's psychiatrist friend, says that he went to lunch with her psychiatrist, and they were talking about it. So the friend says that they took her to St. John's Hospital, but she died in the ambulance, so they took her back home. Which, what? And he says that's what the psychiatrist told the friend. Which, even aside from the fact that the hospital is different, and apparently she died in the ambulance, why would you take her back home and like stage her body off rip? That's a cover up right there. Cause what the fuck? What? But whatever, right? Oh no, Greenson, the psychiatrist, that was his last name. Greenson says at the same discussion with the friend, he says that he was in the ambulance with her, right? Okay, this is all their discussion at lunch. The psychiatrist says he was in the ambulance with her. Now, when the journalist brings this up to the Sun is like, says, quote, "I don't feel comfortable saying what he told me." Okay. The wife and daughter brings it up to the wife and daughter. Wife makes it a point to say, she cuts that off real quick. That sort of thing wasn't talked about. People of that stature, he didn't want to burden me with that. Okay, he didn't want to burden you with the details, but she's in your house every other day eating lunch, and y'all are having girl talk, and okay, whatever though, right? I understand, protect your husband's legacy, I get you, right? Okay. Then we meet Harry Hall, who was an informant for the FBI. He was amongst the mob people, right? Harry Hall is an FBI informant. His FBI agent told him that Bobby was in town and then left the night of Marilyn's death. He was at the Malibu house and then left. But the Hall says there was no investigation into that. It was just a hush-hush because, they don't want the boss to be involved. Cool. Okay. So the journalist leading the documentary inquires to another journalist who was there, like taking part. The press shows up to hear about her death and da-da-da. They're taking pictures and blah, blah, blah. So one of the other journalists who was there taking pictures and actually intimately involved with the stories and stuff per se, right? So they link, and the other journalist says he played detective, and he found a helicopter pilot because he's thinking, okay, so if Bobby was there but left, like how did he get out of here, right? So the other journalist thinks, let me ask pilots in the area. So he finds this helicopter pilot, asks to see his log, and he sees an entry for the general around 2-3 a.m. flying and the pilot flew him to catch a flight en route to San Francisco. And the pilot confirmed this, right? Like, yep, I flew him at around 2-3 in the morning to go to his flight, and then that flight was going to San Francisco. Okay. Because even in the accepted timeline, like 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. is a very large gap. Okay? So 8 p.m. she goes in her room. We find out the psychiatrist associate at 10 p.m. is called to her house. 11 p.m. he's at her house. Now we find a log of a pilot saying that around 2-3 a.m. he flew the general to go catch a flight to San Francisco. Right? Mind you, cops didn't arrive till 4:45 a.m., so we still have time, right? Okay. Now, the journalist that found the pilot calls Kennedy's people to confirm this, right? So he called Kennedy's people to ask if he was at the beach house and ask if that was the reason for the delay, right? And he was told, Kennedy would appreciate if you don't do the story. So they shelved the story. Okay. Right? Now, on top of that, all pictures slash any kind of documentation that would put Marilyn in the same room with either Kennedy brother, all of that was seized, apparently by people claiming to be law enforcement, right? Shortly after her death, all pictures, all videos, all everything is taken. The only living picture is a picture of the two of them, but it's their backs. But you see Marilyn facing like towards the camera, and it's at Kennedy's birthday party. At JFK's birthday party, because you know they're both Kennedys. Okay, right? Okay. The recordings too. The recordings for all the bugs and things. Otosh was told, go get those. Go get the recordings, the audios, go get the bugs, everything. Give it, like, take all of that. Okay. Now, the journalist leading the documentary, he calls FBI agent Jim Doyle, who confirms that his colleagues took all of the pictures, all the recordings, everything. And apparently Doyle was present at her death, along with many, quote, many Bureau people immediately after. Why are y'all all there? This is an FBI agent saying that, yes, not only did we take all the recordings and things, but we were there immediately after she died. Okay. The FBI agent was ordered by, well, no, he makes it a point to say that this was ordered by one of the Kennedy brothers, because they're the only two people at like in the food chain high enough to make that order. So the two men that she was involved with, being their plaything, sneaking around with them, having an amazing time, ordered their minions to get rid of all evidence. Crazy. My poor sis. She deserves so much better. Right? So let's bring her housekeeper into this, because her housekeeper is supposedly the one that found her at 3 a.m. Or no, the one who was concerned that her light was still on at 3 a.m., right? Okay. Housekeeper makes it a point to say, I wasn't included in the information, but I was a witness. Because, you know, she's the housekeeper. But, you know, she's the help. So, like, I wasn't part of these conversations. I didn't get to sit and have cocktails with them, but I was a witness, you know? She was ear hustling, was basically what she was trying to say. Housekeeper says, yes, the general was present the afternoon that she died. But it got so sticky that Robert Kennedy's protectors, like the Secret Service, ? But she said Robert Kennedy's protectors stepped in and had to protect him from Marilyn. I mean, a Gemini's angry and we get to swinging and it's like, say word. But like, you had to protect him from Marilyn, like this faint, fragile woman. Okay. Whatever, though. Basically, the consensus, well, once putting all the pieces together, it's like Bobby was there. They got at her house, present at her house that afternoon that she died. But they got into this argument because, remember, they had he called her previously to call it quits. And it's like, nope, you gotta let all that go. She was like, nope, I'm not coming there. If you want to come see me, come see. If you want to see me, come see me. I'm not coming there. Now he's present at her house the day that she dies. They get into this argument. They're going at it. Remember, Wilson said it got sticky. They was having no, what did he say? Wilson said she was raising a stink, right? Okay. They had a violent argument. That's what he said. They had a violent argument. So Bobby Kennedy is present the afternoon that she dies. They're having this argument. And around 2, 3 a.m., a helicopter pilot flies him to another flight that's headed to San Francisco. At the same time, the housekeeper supposedly saw her light on, or around the same time, Her housekeeper supposedly saw her light on and called a psychiatrist because she was worried about her. Okay. Now, the final decision at the end of all of this, the journalist leading the documentary, his final decision was it was a suicide. There was no, whether accidental or on purpose, we don't know. But she took a bunch of sleeping pills because she was upset about the argument and upset about the brothers and blah, 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 blah. But he does acknowledge that it was deliberately covered up, though, because of the Kennedy brothers. He says there's no evidence that she was murdered. There was no evidence that it was a suicide. It might have been an accidental suicide. Maybe it was on purpose. But they covered it up either way. Now, at the very, very, very end of the documentary is the journalist goes to talk to Peter Lawford, a key player in this entire thing, because it was his house that all of the activity was happening at. Peter Lawford, right? Brother-in-law to the Kennedys. Okay. Journalist goes to speak to him. He's a hollow, empty shell now in his old age. You hear him say, quote, "She was dead. I've had to live with it. I should have got in my car and gone up there. I should have known better." What you talking about, Willis? Like, what you mean by that? But he's a shell of a man. I don't know if it's Alzheimer's or whatever, but he can't all the way put it together. Now, that was his final decision. I told you years ago, after seeing The Secret Life of Marilyn, I was like, nope, because of Kennedy, she was murdered, period. Now, after intricately paying attention to the documentary, when I took the notes, it was the second time we were watching it. So, I'm like, okay, murder, maybe not. Bobby didn't have the intent to kill her, right? Murder. But it was definitely, for sure, like manslaughter or something, meaning you played a part in the death of this person. Even though you didn't mean to. Because, yes, she had a pill problem before, but one, this is not too long, granted, this doesn't mean anything, but one, this is not too long after she just got out of rehab for a pill problem, and everybody knows, just common sense tells you, freshly out of rehab, these people got to stay level-headed, because that's, from my understanding, that's the immediate time everybody goes right back, right? One, she recently got out of rehab for pill problems. Two, both of the Kennedy brothers that she's intimately involved with for a long period of time suddenly call it quits on her, and they were her consistent relationships through all of her struggling marriages and issues. Three, one of the brothers who is part of the problem comes to see her that afternoon, the last afternoon of her life, and they get into an argument, a violent argument, an argument that apparently his protectors had to protect him in, during the argument. And then he disappears, he dashes off. It's giving, she took all these pills and died because she was upset about how y'all was treating her. On top of, and then the government covered it up. Because if he didn't kill her and he had no parts and none of that, why are all these details missing? Why were all these bureau people immediately present? If you had no parts, there would be nothing to clean up, correct? That's my stance on it. My stance is they might not have deliberately killed / murdered her, but it was 100% manslaughter because you played a part in her death. Yes, it was her decision to take all those pills, but think euthanasia, damn near. Euthanasia? Is that a right analogy? Either way, you played a part in it, and the person who aided in your ability to even be involved with her, Peter Lawford, has guilt about the situation. even he don't even have memories of what he ate 2 weeks ago, but he still feels that guilt and feels like he should have been present. Yeah, okay. So that is the conspiracy theory on the death of Marilyn Monroe. There's a bunch of things that you can watch. I recommend you watch the documentary if you're interested in the details of her death. If you want to know the details of her life, I recommend you watch The Secret Life of Marilyn Monroe. It's a Lifetime, I call it a movie, but it's a Lifetime like TV series, they consider it. It's only 2 parts though. Yeah, that's my stance on it. They didn't have to do my birthday twin like that, but I love her nonetheless. I feel her. If you made it to the end of the video and you don't know me, hi. My name's Naori. Stick around. You love it here. Duh. Embrace being a star. Subscribe. Follow my socials. It's No Excuses November. We pushing out content. That's it. Like, there's a bunch of other things in the works. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.